So, it finally happened. Donald J. Trump is president. That means soon enough we're going to have to criticize him because that's the nature of the game. Once a politician gets into office or becomes an actual politician in the case of Trump, the campaign is over and now keeping his feet on the fire is what needs to be done. But until Trump does something actually worthy of criticism, we have plenty of time to talk about the mindless, thuggish communist drones that did what communists always do when they don't get their way: instigate and commit violence, and in the case of feminists, come up with new degeneracy in the public square as well. And it's the latter group about which we'll be talking about in this video because it's the latter group that is the most dangerous. The anarcho-commie idiots will be roundly condemned and most of them charged with various felonies, which by the way leads to them losing their voting rights, which is fantastic, and generally that part of the story will never become important enough. Feminists, on the other hand, are a particularly nasty group of absolute cunts that have been plaguing the society and especially the culture for over 100 years. They are, if you want, a recurring disease for which no efficient antibiotic has been developed until the beginning of this decade, when finally some serious pushback emerged. The good news is that now even the feminist press acknowledged, preemptively I might add, that the feminist march that took place the next day after Trump's inauguration was essentially a gathering of disorder. That much was definitely true since feminism is, in and of itself, a mental disorder. Now, normally I wouldn't bother making a video about this because I already made one about this event which I uploaded last week back when Obama was still president. And secondly, it does become repetitive at some point to keep showing how and why feminism is retarded. But this event, or better said this stream of events that happened under the so-called Women's March, managed to surpass my expectations a little bit by the tactics it used, and it is also big enough to show us the shift within the left that will most likely set the tone for at least this year and most likely for the next year as well. Now, mind you, the tactics that I'm about to show you are in no way new. In fact, nothing is new or progressive for that matter when it comes to the left. What is surprising is that they were willing to bring some of them back and scale up those that were already within the current arsenal. So buckle up because I'll show you quite a bit of degeneracy, although much less than what I had to endure in the research process for this video. There were at least two highly degenerate moments happening on the stage of the Women's March in DC, and I call it that way because that's the name, not because it was an actual women's march. It really wasn't. It was the march of the hard-left feminists upset that Hillary lost. That's all it was. Anyway, in chronological order, the first of these two moments was the shocking moment of putting a 6-year-old child to spout open borders propaganda and international socialist propaganda, and on top of that, describing the 6-year-old as an immigrants' rights activist. Listen to this.
The immigrant rights activist, incredible, inspiring Sophie Cruz and her family.
I'm sorry, but when did this become acceptable? Also, where is the outrage over this? A few weeks ago, a YouTuber that I generally like dedicated an entire video criticizing a parent trying to publish children's books about free markets, an effort which I wholeheartedly support, by the way. Apparently, that is indoctrination. No such outrage is reserved, though, for when leftists bring in 5- or 6-year-olds or even children as young as 20 months old to highly politicized and extremist manifestations. The media went crazy when the Freedom Girls performed at a Trump rally, calling the performance creepy and disturbing, even though children joining choirs and musical bands, which then perform at various events, has been going on since forever. But performing for what was to become the future president of the United States was a step too far for the oversensitive cathedral media. Meanwhile, children speaking at political rallies, especially extremist and non-mainstream political rallies, and yes, arguing for illegal immigrants and misandrist feminism is not and never has been a mainstream political position with the general society. But anyway, children speaking at such rallies is suddenly okay if it serves the interests of the extreme left. The Huffington Post praises the performance of Sophie Cruz, and most of the commentariat agrees as well. These are the same people who said it was sick that children were singing for Bush or for Donald Trump. But anyway, let's listen a little bit to Sophie Cruz.
My name is Sophie Cruz. We are here together, making a chain of love to protect our families. Let us fight with love, faith, and courage so that our families will not be destroyed.
Again, putting the shoe on the other foot. When an artistic band of children sang about the enemies of freedom, all the bien-pensants in the cathedral media were rhetorically asking whether those children even know what they were singing about. The exact same people don't even consider asking such thing, or whether Sophie Cruz even understands the general meaning of what adults call the immigration policy. Because make no mistake, Sophie's parents are criminals. They shouldn't be in the United States, and she is an anchor baby. If the concern is the separation of the family, then Sophie and her entire family should be deported back to where they came from. And Sophie is free to make a career in public speaking if that's what she'll want to do, but in her country, not in the United States. Let's listen further.
I also want to tell the children not to be afraid, because we are not alone. There are still many people that have their hearts filled with love and tenders to snuggle in this path of life.
And this is where I wanted to get. Just take a look in the low bar. It says there, and for those of you only listening, quote, Sophie Cruz handed Pope Francis a letter about immigration during his 2015 visit to the United States. And now we know. This is a child that has been exploited without remorse by her parents at the behest of the left for political goals for at least 2 years now. You don't believe me? Here's the Washington Compost, not even a former newspaper, reporting on that event in September 2015. Quote, 5-year-old Sophie Cruz, the daughter of 2 undocumented immigrants, reached the Pope on her second attempt Wednesday after he motioned for her to approach his Pope-mobile. Security stopped Sophie as she first approached the Pope during a parade at the Ellipse outside the White House. On her second attempt, after her father lifted her over the barricade, Francis motioned for her to come over, and security obliged. The Pope kissed her cheek and took her envelope, which included a letter about immigration and a photo with words that translate as, "My friends and I love each other no matter our skin color." Sophie said her hope is that he can bring change to the U.S. immigration laws. To speak with the President and Congress for they can give La Reforma Migratoria for all the immigrants, she said, adding that she has a second letter to give President Obama someday. Getting Sophie to the Pope didn't come without a bit of planning. Alicia Flores, executive director of the La Hermandad in Los Angeles, said the group chose Sophie to approach the Pope after a similar plan worked in Rome involving another young girl. Raul Cruz, who came to the United States 10 years ago, then agreed to let his daughter partake in the plan so the Pope could hear their message, close quote. So now you know too. When I say that this is a child exploited by her criminal parents at the behest of militant far-left groups, I'm not engaging in hyperbole. This is the actual case. But the Child Protective Services, I presume, don't have the time for this. They're busy harassing parents for not cleaning up enough or other similarly serious crimes. Political exploitation by textbook criminal parents for the purposes of legalizing the parents' crimes? Well, that's just fine, both with the CPS and the cathedral media. But what happens next is the first indication that this is a cult. No, seriously, watch this.
Let's keep together and fight for the rights. God is with us.
And then she says the same thing in Spanish, and then this happens.
Está con nosotros. Sí se puede, 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 sí se puede.
There is nothing that can make normal people applaud this. Only a cult mentality can do this. But check this sign out. Make diversity great again. And it has there, of course, the symbol of by far the most regressive, repressive, and murderous cult, Islam. This is, again, not a coincidence. At least one of the top organizers of this march is a big fan of Sharia law and of Hamas, the organization that advocates for the complete extermination of all Jews. Is anyone of the left busy disavowing this? Of course not, don't be silly. They're busy trying to find anti-Semitism in Trump's America First slogan. There is none, but they'll never stop trying. Meanwhile, the highest per capita concentration of Jew hatred is on the left and always has been. But the leftist exploitation of children for political purposes at the end of last week has been quite widespread. Take this young kid convinced to commit arson because screw our president.
Participating in the fire. What's your name?
My name's Connor, and I actually kind of started this fire.
So why'd you start that fire, Carter?
It's Connor.
Sorry, why'd you start that fire?
Because I felt like it, and because I'm just saying screw our president.
Okay, well, there you have it.
Is anyone outraged over this outside the conservatives? Of course not. The CNN didn't make a special show about the creepiness of using children for violent political crimes. They did one, though, about the creepiness of children singing for Bush. You see, singing for the president in office is bad. Burning stuff and swearing the president in office on TV is not that bad. The total amount of children at the so-called Women's March is hard to estimate. But there were quite a few of them, to be sure. ABC, for instance, glorified the unsupervised 20 months old because, you see, girl power matters. Child safety? Not so much. I watched at least 1,000 pictures of different children not only attending this march, but bearing signs they couldn't possibly understand. Do you think this 2-year-old understands what woke as fuck means? Or maybe this 5-year-old knows what hands off my pussy means? But more importantly, does anyone outside the tiny lesbianic cult of far-left feminism believe that using children this way is acceptable? Because if the answer is yes, then there's a huge problem here. But it gets better. Between children wearing vulgar signs, children being exploited on stage by their criminal parents, and children committing violent crimes at the behest of their cowardly leftist parents, Madonna also spoke at this rally. Let's play the clip.
Hello. Are you still awake out there? Are you sure about that? Can you hear me?
Now notice that most of the front row audience is formed by children. Keep that in mind as you listen to her speech.
Are you ready to shake up the world? Welcome to the revolution of love, to the rebellion, to our refusal as women to accept this new age of tyranny, where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime.
Now I'm sure Madonna is terribly worried, especially from the perspective of her $560 million net worth. Anyway, carry on.
It took this horrific moment of darkness to wake us the fuck up.
Good job, Madonna, teaching the predominantly child audience how to be respectful and how to do political rallies. And the problem isn't necessarily the swearing per se, though I would argue that 5-year-olds shouldn't be exposed to such things, but that she's not even entertaining. The purpose here is a cult-like rally, not to be entertaining. You'll see what I mean. Let's play some more.
It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end.
Now please, tell me this is not a cult. I dare you. I mean, seriously, this makes the Jesus camp look quite okay by comparison, if you ask me.
So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here.
It's always interesting to listen to revolutionary communist rhetoric from a multi-millionaire. I mean, poor thing, she's so oppressed, as she'll tell us soon enough.
The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid.
You sure about that, Madonna? I mean, you do realize that the speech you're holding is not in some street corner watching out for the jackboots, but right in the middle of the capital city of one of the freest countries on earth. Now, it used to be the freest, but then Obama happened. Also, are you sure you want to be equal? You're making in a week more than the entire audience combined in a month. And good for you, but I'm just saying that maybe being equal is not particularly in your best interest.
That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity.
Oh gosh, I so wish I could deport this sorry lot into North Korea. They have a much better gender equality index over there, by the way, so you should absolutely like it, provided that you survive the first week, which I somehow doubt. Yet Madonna, or her speechwriter, seems convinced that things are so bad that she starts advocating for terrorism, or at the very least that terrorism is at least in principle acceptable at this point. But until then, she has a political message of reason and calm for her detractors.
And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything, fuck you. Fuck you.
Now, imagine Clint Eastwood holding such a rally and speech, or Adam Baldwin. You'd never hear the end of it in the cathedral media. But Madonna cursing repeatedly in front of so many children and being divisive, as leftists routinely accuse the right of being, that's perfectly fine. Now, mind you, I'm not questioning her right to be a complete idiot. I believe in people's right to be stupid. But I am questioning the morality of this approach, and I'm also questioning the more mental sanity of parents who thought it's a good idea to take their children to witness such filth. I'm also sick and tired of this pretend game that these old celebrities are somehow being brave for doing this. They're not, they're simply not, because it's not a career-ending proposition to be a militant leftist on the stage. Heck, it might even be a career boost. Anyway, at its worst, stunts like these are career neutral.
It is the beginning of much needed change. Change that will require sacrifice, people.
Sacrifices? I wonder what Madonna has in mind.
Change that will require many of us to make different choices in our lives.
Presumably, adherence to this lesbianic cult is the first sacrifice.
Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
I'm sorry, what? Come again, please?
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Now imagine a right-wing celebrity holding such a rally in Washington after Obama took office. You can't imagine such thing because right-wingers aren't insane. Leftism has become a cult, a terroristic cult, mind you, and this disease needs to be stopped. This, my fellow deplorables, is what incitement to terrorism looks like. And it's not just Madonna, she's actually quite late to the party. CNN has been indulging in Trump assassination scenarios for quite some time now. And just like with the other left-wing terrorist movement, Black Lives Matter, the cathedral media is busy normalizing these things. How long until one of the many deluded leftists tries again to assassinate the president or put a bomb somewhere? With rhetoric like this, it's only a matter of time before such attempt is being made. This is seriously dangerous business, and this is why I regard feminism as far more dangerous than the violent anarcho-commies that burned a few things a day before. Those ones are easy to deal with. This, however, is not only much harder to deal with because it's a bigger societal cancer, but also a lot more pernicious. Almost all of the academia thinks like this, almost all of the cathedral media thinks like this, almost all of governmental employees, the so-called deep state, thinks like this. Regular people don't, but regular people have much fewer tools to crack down on this insanity. Those that could and should crack down on this insanity will not. Unless the Trump administration gets to work to fundamentally change things, and by that I mean purging the deep state of loons, and boy, there are so many of them. But this march wasn't singular. In addition to those held in democratic strongholds around the United States, many so-called sister marches were held in Europe, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Latin America. Now, notice something missing. Basically, the sister marches took place in exactly the places where women have it best, as in the best in entire human history. There were no sister marches in Syria or Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Qatar, places like these. Also, contrary to the relentless claim by the feminists that this was a grassroots movement, the evidence insists to disagree. In Denmark, for instance, the top organizer is a notorious left-wing activist born and raised in the United States who moved to Denmark. The Pravda on Hudson, formerly known as the New York Times and a former newspaper, publishes this picture as being from the alleged sister march in Accra, Ghana. Now, notice something in this picture. I mean, I know it's racist to point this out, but it really does seem to me that the women in the photo are simply not from Ghana. Now, I could be wrong, but the likelihood of these militant leftists being from Ghana is smaller than the likelihood of being struck by lightning on Friday the 13th at 1300 hours and 13 minutes whilst being 13 years old. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's highly unlikely. The same seems to be true with the photo from the alleged sister march, also published by Pravda on Hudson. In Thailand, it doesn't seem to be full of Thai people in this photo. After all, why would Thai people, men or women, give a toss about Trump? The same weird coincidence happens with the picture from the alleged sister march allegedly held in Erbil, Iraq. At least 2, most likely 3 of the 6 women visible in this picture, posted by the former newspaper, are simply not Iraqi. A friend of mine from Budapest went to the march to sniff around. At least a third of those present at the march couldn't speak Hungarian. You know Budapest, the place which hosts the George Soros University, still misleadingly named the Central European University. This wasn't by accident. This was a design bought and paid for global effort by globalists. This, my fellow deplorables, is what I call a large-scale agitprop operation. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean all the attendees were bought and paid for, but the important ones, the ones that gathered the crowds, were. And it is very blatant considering that they wanted so badly to have marches in Africa for which they couldn't find any local to want to engage, so they held it anyway with their own shills. This was not an accident. When I called this out the first time, I got some angry responses to the tune of, "Well, I went there with my daughter and no one paid me." Yeah, sure, love, that's probably true. But the success of such an agitprop campaign is measured exactly like this. How many fellow travelers and deluded fools you can get to join you without them ever being aware of the larger picture. The more you get, the more successful the agitprop campaign is. For instance, I'm sure there were many people that came in good faith at the Sister March in Berlin, but I'm also sure that this ringleader wasn't one of them. Just take a look at this. Allahu Akbar. This, my fellow deplorables, is what we'll face in the current year. That's why I keep saying the faster we learn agitprop and start delivering counter-narratives, the better. But I'll explain more about that in future episodes. The takeaway is this. The left has a wide and well-funded global network of activists that they usually use covertly. But not this time. This time they did it overtly. This means they are afraid. This also means opportunity. Homework for you. Identify every single activist that attended this rally in your country or your city. Learn everything you can about them and then remember them for future reference so the next time you see them involved in something, you will know in advance that you're dealing with a professional paid activist. That is a very useful information in the field. I'll make a separate video on how useful that information can be, but until then, thank you for watching, thank you for your continuous and generous support, and I'll see you around on Freedom Alternative.